So they call this meeting with all the Obama top people, and no revised PDB has been issued yet. No revised intelligence community assessment has happened yet. The last thing that happened in the intel community was, we're going to tell them that there really was no significant Russian interference, at least insofar as election apparatus goes. And FBI said, we're out. We're going to issue our own. And then Clapper said, all right, well, let's just pause everything. Then everybody gets together. Right after that, before any revised intel happened, before anything happened, they began leaking to the media. WAPO, New York Times, CNN, saying something diametrically opposed, saying, Russia interfered. And that, to you describe that as the smoking gun that shows there had been a decision to shift the entire messaging around this in a way they thought would undermine.
When Megyn Kelly steps into the ring, legends don't just stumble, they collapse. Barack Obama, once seen as the polished face of modern politics, watches his legacy unravel with sharp sarcasm and bold truth. It's not just critique, it's a fearless exposure, no soft jabs here, only a direct takedown of media hype, glamorized failures, and promises dressed up as progress. Kelly goes beyond opinions, using sharp insight and firm language to challenge comfortable stories. She doesn't just roast, she burns the myths down in real time. Illusions fade quickly, as bold truths and raw facts take their place. Kelly strips away the spin, revealing what's often hidden beneath. This isn't casual talk, it's demolition with purpose. Every word lands with weight, aiming straight at the heart of media narratives. What's left behind isn't noise, it's uncomfortable clarity.
How much is enough money, according to the Obamas? 70 million? Because public reports estimate that is their net worth, parlayed on the back of Barack Obama's 14 years of holding political office. He did not spend 50 years in government service. He did a stint in the Illinois State Senate. He did a couple years in the U.S. Senate before he ran for office and won. All right, then he did 2 terms as president. And off of that, he's made himself over $100 million. Almost $100 million, probably over.
Barack Obama entered the political spotlight like a modern-day messiah on a unicorn, gliding through waves of media hype, flashing cameras, and sleek designer-made hope posters. Touted as the face of real transformation, he quickly mastered the art of maintaining the status quo, just with better lighting, smoother speeches, and flawless teleprompter delivery. It was change wrapped in presentation, not policy, as Megyn Kelly cuts through that shimmering illusion. A clearer picture begins to form. The emperor wasn't just undressed. He was proudly selling that nakedness as the new height of political branding. Her takedown exposes how performance often masks the lack of true progress, leaving behind more questions than answers.
You can't say anything that is in any way critical of a minority racial group, especially blacks in America.
That was what Barack Obama learned very quickly when he ran for office. Remember that in his memoir, he said he just sort of when he went to a campus, he wanted to only hang out with black people. He had to break up with his white girlfriend. And then he really threw his own grandmother, who had actually scrimped and saved to put him in prep school, when he said she was a typical white person who was unduly afraid of black males approaching her. So he didn't want to be known as a multiracial or non-racial person. He really wanted to emphasize only half of his own ancestry. And it was very sad, because when you actually looked at his grandmother and all of that, she was the one person in his life who made sure that he had access to a competitive education.
Let's talk about the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who received the award with the ease of grabbing a complimentary mint at a hotel lobby. The man had barely settled into the Oval Office, hadn't even adjusted his office chair when Oslo handed him the prestigious medal. And for what exactly? For existing with charm. For being tall, well-spoken, and representing hope. It felt less like recognition for action, and more like applause for potential. Meanwhile, drone strikes were already being lined up like Amazon packages during a holiday sale. But don't worry, each one was wrapped in a carefully crafted press release, delivered with a calm tone and a confident smile. It was diplomacy rebranded, where targeted airstrikes on faraway weddings were spun as calculated steps toward global peace.
Well, I'm so glad I didn't have a boy.
Yeah.
Because he would have been a Barack Obama.
It's like baby Barack. It would have been amazing.
No, I would have felt for him.
She just borrowed our boys.
Yes, I got plenty.
Wow.
You catch that? She's glad she didn't have a boy because he would have been a Barack Obama.
Megyn Kelly doesn't just roast, she surgically dissects, word by word. And Obama's once sacred cow status gets no special treatment. He strolled into the White House with a celebrity glow that made it feel like he'd drop an album with Beyoncé before addressing unemployment. And in true Hollywood style, that wasn't far off photo ops. Red carpets, slow jams with Jimmy Fallon, and viral guest spots with comedians who treated his every pause like it was a divine message. All the while, real issues simmered under the surface. Flint, Michigan still couldn't get access to clean drinking water. And U.S. veterans were stuck waiting longer for basic health care than people waiting in line for the latest iPhone. The spotlight stayed bright, but the shadows were growing. And Kelly, with her unfiltered lens, doesn't let those moments slide past unnoticed.
Here she is talking about it. If it were me, I would say something nice about him. I would say, like, he's just so charming. It was meant to be. I knew he could heal the earth in the way he did. There was only one person who could do it, and it was my husband, Barack Obama, whatever. Then she gets on to talking a little bit about him personally, and this is how that sounded.
When a girlfriend comes to visit, it's usually like, you got to stay for 2 days because it's going to take us
so much
2
time
days
to
check up. Now, Barack's come in, he's come out, and he's like, y'all still talking? He'll sit down for 5 minutes, be like, how are the boys?
Let's not forget his unmatched talent for saying absolutely nothing in the most beautiful, polished way possible. Entire speeches flowed like gospel music until you paused, rewound, and realized he had promised everything to everyone without actually committing to anything concrete. It was political poetry designed to mesmerize, and it worked. At times, it felt like the man could feed 5,000 people with 5 talking points and a well-tested slogan. But beneath that elegant delivery was a masterclass in strategic deflection. A Shakespearean-level performance of dodging responsibility, wrapped in theatrical calm and presidential grace. It was charm over clarity, style over substance, and Megyn Kelly doesn't let that slide unnoticed.
How the soundbite begins. Okay, it's not the fear for myself. I drive around in a 4-car motorcade with a police escort. I'm Michelle Obama. Unbelievable, right? Who talks about themselves that way? Even if you are Michelle Obama. Barack Obama doesn't talk about himself that way. It's just like the hubris. And then this is the part that jumped out to me more than any other. I do still worry about my daughters in the world, even though they are somewhat recognized.
Then came the grand economic recovery. The stock market soared. Wall Street threw confetti, and tech elites popped champagne bottles on rooftop parties. But on the ground, average Americans were juggling part-time jobs with no benefits, trying to pay rent with hope and maybe a leftover campaign button or two. Megyn Kelly doesn't need flashy visuals to highlight that contrast. She just states the reality plainly. Obama bailed out the banks, not the people. The very institutions that nearly crashed the economy walked away with bonuses, while families were handed speeches about resilience and a few carefully posed selfies. And then came the healthcare revolution, the so-called crown jewel, Obamacare, marketed like the iPhone of public policy, affordable, sleek, and supposedly groundbreaking. But what many received felt more like a refurbished BlackBerry with a cracked screen. Premiums rose sharply, doctors vanished from networks, and the official website crashed harder than public confidence. Still, Americans were reminded through confident press briefings that it was better than nothing, even as they struggled to decipher their 20-page deductible breakdowns. Foreign policy. That was a masterclass in overpromising and underdelivering. Syria turned into a disaster tied to a red line drawn in disappearing ink. Libya became a DIY democracy project that unraveled into chaos. Iraq. Just another round in America's endless game of global whack-a-mole. And through it all, Obama walked the international stage like a thoughtful peacetime philosopher, all while holding a discreet kill list folded neatly in his jacket pocket. Style met contradiction, and Kelly doesn't hesitate to point it out with striking clarity.
Instant affectation, like, oh, my man. And like she doubles down in the following clip. It's just over the top. And Here it is, 37.
There hasn't been one moment in our marriage where I thought about quitting my man. And we've had some really hard times. So we have had a lot of fun times, a lot of adventures, and I have become a better person because of the man I'm married to.
Okay, don't make me cry now. Right at the beginning of the show.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
Don't let me.
But don't worry, the selfies were always on point. Obama spent a significant amount of time crafting his public image and curating his cool factor, often more than confronting the bureaucratic gridlock that clogged the system from within. He gave interviews to YouTubers in bathtubs and appeared on pop culture shows, while veterans across the country struggled to get timely hospital appointments. If charisma were real currency, America might have run a budget surplus for generations. But unfortunately, charm doesn't erase student loans or lower skyrocketing insulin prices. Megyn Kelly tears through this legacy like it's printed on thin, glossy paper. Behind the polished speeches, perfectly tailored suits, and that commanding tone, was a presidency that often delivered more style than substance. Scandals like the IRS targeting controversy or concerns around surveillance programs were often met with surprise, even when those very actions were quietly authorized under his watch. He maintained composure and calm, even as oversight slipped through the cracks. And then there's the delicate topic of race, the expectation that he would be the post-racial president, the one to bridge America's deep divides and unify its people. That hopeful promise echoed through his campaign, but the delivery, as Kelly highlights, didn't quite live up to the vision. The gap between symbolism and tangible change became increasingly difficult to ignore.
Again, it's like a Michelle Obama situation. We don't care. No one feels sorry for you. Shut up and do your stupid job where you sit in your air-conditioned studio with people running out to powder your face. And I mean, I guess somebody has done that hair. It's unclear, but they'd have to be insisting on it, wouldn't they? In any event, the same outfit every night. We know absolutely no effort is made to look.
Megyn Kelly doesn't just laugh at the contradictions. She reveals how they were carefully packaged and sold to the public, like luxury beliefs wrapped in high-end branding. Take the climate change crusade. For instance, the same president, who lectured the world about shrinking carbon footprints, was frequently seen flying around the globe like a jet-setting summit after summit produced more signatures, more promises, and unfortunately, more hot air, both environmental and political. And speaking of contradictions, let's talk about his stance on wealth inequality. While publicly criticizing the elite, he regularly mingled with billionaires who could casually pronounce Chardonnay without blinking. His post-presidency years resemble a high-end influencer career, complete with Netflix production deals, six-figure speaking gigs, and beachfront mansions, far from the working-class communities he once claimed to uplift. That's not just irony, that's an entire salt factory poured over the frustrations of everyday Americans. While drone shots captured his Hawaiian estate from cinematic angles, he played the media with skill, and they followed his tune like it was a national concert. The same press corps that gasped over his tan suit rarely asked why his administration prosecuted more whistleblowers than any in modern history. But it didn't seem to matter. He was a walking screensaver.com, polished and perfectly curated. Even scandals arrived, pre-wrapped in poetic language, softened by eloquence, and framed by a media that often chose admiration over accountability.
Everything she says is negative. We've been watching clips from her podcast over the past couple of weeks. Everything she says is negative. I mean, you would never know you are hearing from a woman who is first lady for 8 years, has become probably a billionaire by this point, is out on David Geffen's yacht every other summer, her estate in Martha's Vineyard, her daughters who went to these Tony schools. You would think you were listening to somebody basically like a...
Megyn Kelly doesn't have to stretch the truth. The irony practically writes itself. The so-called transparent president often operated behind a wall of executive orders. The voice of hope left a generation buried in debt and disillusionment. The self-proclaimed reformer turned out to be one of the most polished salesmen of the same political swamp he vowed to drain. And then there's the cult of personality, a myth so strong, you'd think he cured cancer and brought peace to the planet, judging by the reverence his speeches still receive. But what really changed? Income inequality expanded. Political polarization didn't just grow, it exploded into everyday life. Global tensions continued to simmer, even as he smiled through photo ops and state dinners. Despite it all, He's still treated like political royalty, while his actual legacy sits on the shelf, wrapped in branding and nostalgic headlines. Kelly doesn't flinch as she peels back the layers. She's the surgeon with no anesthesia, slicing through the protective myth and exposing a presidency that prioritized image over impact, presentation over real progress. From botched policy deals to promises that quietly faded. Obama didn't lead a revolution, he starred in a long-running Netflix-style saga about one, and when the real work got messy, when the applause faded and the media turned elsewhere, he didn't roll up his sleeves. He rolled into vacation mode, memoirs, podcasts, and speaker tours, while the challenges he left behind were handed off like a group project no one wanted to finish.
More fuel on the fire that there's a potential, maybe a divorce or some sort of rockiness going on in the Obamas' relationship. They both posted these mirrored, very choreographed Valentine's Day messages on X, but he was just seen at an LA, the basketball team, the Clippers, thank you, game without her. And then on Tuesday, he was spotted eating out at a fancy dinner in Sherman Oaks with his both daughters, Malia and Sasha, but again, no.
And somehow, even after it all, he still found the time to lecture Americans about unity from a beachfront microphone, flanked by private security and trays of organic hors d'oeuvres. It's not just about the flaws, it's about the gall, the unshakable confidence, wrapped in polished rhetoric, that turned every misstep into a high-minded moment. At times, it felt like he could crash a car into a daycare and frame it as a lesson in resilience. Megyn Kelly doesn't have to exaggerate, the contradictions speak for themselves. The entire legacy reads like a satire so sharp, you'd think it was fiction. You could write an entire book on the contradictions alone. And it might outsell everything on his library tour combined. In retirement, he now floats above the national chaos like a philosopher king, baffled that the very system he helped entrench is now crumbling. He had 8 full years to reshape the country, yet the resume he left behind is padded with symbolic gestures, passive-aggressive lectures, and a loyal fan base that often mistakes charisma for true competence. His legacy isn't hope, it's the lingering belief that polished presentation can replace actual results. That style, when delivered with enough confidence, can somehow stand in for substance. But Megyn Kelly doesn't roast for laughs. She does it to remind the world that history deserves a second look, one without the rose-tinted filter. Because when the speeches fade and the posters gather dust, what's left behind is a presidency that felt more like a well-edited rerun than real. Lasting transformation. And no cinematic music, no glossy memoirs, no well-lit flashbacks can change the facts. The administration promised much, delivered far less, and walked off the stage as if the unfinished business was just someone else's problem.
What I think binds it together, all these different strands, case upholding healthcare, a case declaring same-sex marriage part of our constitutional protections, of mourning. I think what pulls it all together is that no one person did any of that.
So he's sitting around on a June Thursday thinking about himself.
And as this roast closes in like a final hammer strike, one thing becomes undeniably clear. Behind the glamour, the spotlight, and the curated brand of cool was a presidency far more invested in shaping its image than delivering real, measurable impact. And that right there is a roast that's still smoldering. Because the truth doesn't fade with applause. It lingers, demanding a second look. Let's not forget the now infamous red carpet approach to crisis management. Every major scandal, riot, or national disaster came prepackaged with a carefully scripted statement, one that sounded poetic, looked presidential, but rarely moved the needle. Responses were often so vague and delayed, you'd think he was waiting on a Netflix screenwriter to punch up the dialogue before stepping to the mic. While real people struggled in real time, headlines and hashtags took center stage. Meanwhile, Obama sat comfortably at the cool kids table, often pretending to be above the chaos instead of in charge of confronting it. His defenders call it composure. They say he was graceful under pressure, but more often, it felt like the polished performance of someone smiling through the questions rather than answering them. And there's a big difference between true diplomacy and strategic disappearance. When the country cried out for clarity, what it often received was poetry. When it needed decisive action, it was given a relatable anecdote. And when backbone was required, something firm, direct, and unshakable, it got carefully rehearsed bromides wrapped in applause breaks. Kelly doesn't have to twist the facts, she simply lays them out. And in doing so, she reminds us that beneath the polish, a presidency defined by missed moments and filtered memories can't escape a second reading, one without the stage lights.
Know all of the earnings. The Obamas reportedly own 4 luxury properties. A home in Martha's Vineyard, estimated to be worth some $20 million. In addition to properties in Washington, D.C., reportedly bought for $8.1 million. A beachfront home in Hawaii, reportedly bought for $8.7 million. And a home bought in Chicago for $1.65 million. Is that more than you need, Mr. Obama? Mrs. Obama?
Megyn Kelly makes it crystal clear, the emperor's legacy isn't just hollow. It's proudly wrapped in gold foil and sold to the public as a gourmet failure. For years, Obama preached transparency, yet his administration quietly expanded the surveillance state into something out of a Silicon Valley playbook. The Constitution became more of a backdrop prop, elegantly framed behind lofty policy speeches, but rarely reflected in the practices unfolding behind the scenes. And yet, strangely, a powerful reverence still lingers, a refusal to acknowledge that behind the perfectly polished image was a president who mastered the art of rising above the consequences of his own decisions. He didn't lead from the front lines, he narrated from the sidelines. And now, he's taken on the role of political ghostwriter, haunting the stage with commentary while pretending he had no hand in scripting the very chaos he now critiques. Megyn's roast doesn't end with a punchline. It ends with a mirror, a sharp, unfiltered reminder that style without substance can become a dangerous illusion. And the price of that illusion wasn't paid in book deals or applause breaks, it was paid by everyday people left to clean up the mess that followed. The myth may continue in coffee table books and campaign flashbacks, but the truth, the raw, uncomfortable truth, echoes louder now than ever before. And this story, it's far from over.